Grandparents' Day. All right, good. Uh, we've got a tailgate party at the Soders coming up soon, so take a look at that. At their house, tailgate at their house. Okay, well, I guess I'll do the opening prayer. Let us pray. Gracious God, we give thanks for all our blessings, and we'd ask that you continue to challenge us to do your good deeds on earth. We lift up our neighbors and our friends and our families who are in any adversity or sorrow or needs. And we just ask that you help us love one another as you love us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, Ken is going to do the introduction.
So we're pleased to have Jeff Jaynes with us this morning, and I think many of you in the room know Jeff, maybe have worked with him in various ways in the community. He is the executive director of Restore Hope, and he's going to be talking about that this morning, and other things that he's been involved in. During the COVID time, he led the city's funding of rent relief. He's also a big proponent of lease or eviction mediation, and has focused for a long time not only on helping the homeless but also preventing homelessness. And you might remember that he was part of the group that led Family Promise, which our church participates in. He was part of the group that led bringing that to Tulsa. So we're very honored to have him, and Jeff, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate it, and I'm loud naturally. So if this gets too loud, then we'll turn it down. I was once. So we'll talk about all of the different programs that we have at Restore Hope. But one of those programs is our chapel program, and I was scheduled to be the speaker one day, and there was just one person in the lobby. And so I just went up to her, and do any of you know my friend Jim Lynn? I know he's a Sooner, so I know there are a lot of Cowboys in the room, but Jim Lynn was on our board, and Jim Lynn has a laugh that is like no other. And he was there that day, and I went to talk to this woman, and I said, "Would you like to come into chapel?" And she said, "Well, are you the speaker?" And I said, "Well, actually, today I am the speaker." She said, "I'm not coming." She said, "You're too loud." And at which point Jim Lynn's laugh echoes through the building. And I said, "Well, actually, usually people like that. They say I'm the first preacher they've ever heard, that so many preachers are quiet or whatever, and that, people like that." She said, "No, I had a stroke years ago, and it enhanced my hearing." Never heard of such a thing, but it enhanced her hearing. And she said, "You're just too loud for me." I said, "Well, what if I speak quietly?" She never came into chapel, but we had a really good conversation, a good laugh, and it made for a great story. I'm so thankful to be here today, and I really want to start with that. I want to thank this class specifically. How many of you were here when I spoke 5 years ago? You may not remember, just a few of you. But you took good care of me. I remember that well. It was around the time that my grandmother passed. And I don't remember if I had to reschedule or if I went straight to Wichita from here, but I remember this class taking such good care of me during that time, and I really want to thank you for that. It was obviously a difficult time, but a special time in my life, and so I'll never forget the grace that the Challengers class gave to me. And so if you're new, if you're a visitor, and I know there are a couple of relatively new members of the class, just know this is a great class, and I say that from an outsider perspective. I also want to say thank you to this church. Restore Hope has had the opportunity to, and I've had the opportunity personally, to work with this church on a lot of different community activities. Ken mentioned Family Promise. Family Promise, I'm so proud every time I hear the stories of what's happening with Family Promise now. I'm no longer on the board, and I'm just a donor at this point. But to go from nothing to what they do now to help our community. And I'm not here to talk about Family Promise today, but I could, for an hour, talk about the gift of what Family Promise does. They are deeply connected to our group of agencies that are working to fight homelessness called A Way Home for Tulsa. My friend Wayne Kendrick knows a lot about A Way Home for Tulsa, maybe more than he'd like to know. But I got to work with Wayne on that. But Family Promise is deeply connected to that and are part of our community's response to homelessness. And I know by just driving in that that's something that this church values at a high level. I'm also thankful for the ways that it's supported Restore Hope. How many of you know about Restore Hope? A few of you. Fantastic. If you don't, that's great. That's what we're here for today. So we'll talk about Restore Hope. Hopefully at the end, if I say how many of you know, you'll raise more hands. But I also want to say thank you personally to this church as a dad of 2 Eisenhower students. My youngest son is a 5th grader at Eisenhower now, and my oldest son came through Eisenhower from kindergarten all the way up. And so, first of all, thanks for the parking lot. I know that is a hassle for you. I can imagine just the hassle of parents parking in the lot and all of that. And so I want to say thank you, and I'm sorry. Not necessarily for the way that I've parked, but the way that other people may have parked. And I want to thank you as a Cub Scout parent as well. I've had a lot of great times at Pinewood Derby in your gym. And so thank you for being a church that cares about our community. That really matters. It really is something that's important to me, and I'm really thankful for that. It doesn't surprise me that I get to see my friend Ken Klein here because I know how he cares about the community. But that's just the way this church works. And so I'm thankful for that, and I want to start off by saying that. I do want to talk about Restore Hope, but I want to pray first. Is that okay? Let's pray. Gracious God, thank you for this time. Thank you for gathering us together. Thank you for this amazing church and all that it does. God, I ask that you would bless our time, that you would be at the forefront of our brains, of our hearts, of our souls, and that you would connect what we do today to what you're calling us to do going forward. God, I thank you for all of these things. In Jesus' name, amen. So Restore Hope is celebrating our 45th anniversary this year. So those of you who don't know about us, just means that we need to do a better job of telling people about Restore Hope. I will say that in the United Methodist Church, we're pretty well known because that's who started us. The United Methodist Church started us 45 years ago as a response to the need in our community. I was the pastor of Southern Hills United Methodist Church before I came to Restore Hope. Southern Hills just around the corner from Harvard Avenue, and also just around the corner from 1,000 Section 8 apartments. And you can imagine, as the pastor of Southern Hills, we had a lot of people come knock on our doors asking for help. And that's true about churches in general, right? When people have a need, they often knock on the door of a church, whether that's the small town church or the big city churches. You know, I was at a meeting with David Wiggs, the pastor of Boston Avenue, and you can imagine a lot of people knock on the door of Boston Avenue, and they need help. Well, David and I in seminary, we were not trained on the best practices of social work. Now, I have some other experience in my own life that helped me understand how to help people in need and how to do that. But in seminary, you learn how to preach, you learn how to teach, you learn some Hebrew, some Greek, you learn a lot of different things, but you don't learn what to do when somebody comes knocking on the door asking for help. And the church really isn't it. We should, as a church, be engaged in the community just as this church is. But in many ways, it's hard. It's not exactly set up to do that kind of work. And so in 1978, the United Methodist Church said, hey, what if we started a group that people could go to get help? Instead of going from church to church to church, they could go to what we now call Restore Hope. It had the lovely name in 1978 of Tulsa District Cooperative Ministries. Just rolls off the tongue, right? Then we thought we'd get fancy, and we called it United Methodist Cooperative Ministries. In 94, we changed it to Restore Hope, quite controversially in our church. You know, every time you make a change in the church, it's controversial because we haven't done it that way before. But in 94, we became Restore Hope. And I love that because actually on a really regular basis, and it's something that I'm really proud of, on a regular basis, we have people who we help that say, you restored my hope. You did what your name says. And our mission is longer than that, but at the heart of our mission, we're there to restore hope. We're there to help families in a financial crisis move to economic and spiritual vitality. Now, that last word is really key, vitality. It would be good enough if we said that our mission is to help families who are in a crisis move to economic and spiritual stability, right? We could all get behind that, getting somebody out of a hole, back on level ground. That's a good thing. But that's not what we really want, is it? What we really want for the families that we help is not just to get them out of the hole, but to help them soar, right? We want them to thrive. We want them to be the citizens of our community that we want for citizens in our community. We want them to be the people of God that follow the dreams that God has for them. We want them to thrive. And so our task and my job as the executive director is, how do we help families who are in the middle of a crisis thrive and move toward vitality? It's not just to get them back to square one, which I think we do a pretty good job of, but my regular challenge is, okay, how do we do that better? In 1978, when we started a food pantry. That was one of the things that was part of our original program. I would call that Restore Hope 1.0. You know, everything's 1 point or whatever now. But Restore Hope 1.0 had a lot of different programs, and the only one that has remained from that time is our food program. But I'll tell you, we help with food better now than we did 45 years ago. It's in significant ways. Now, it's still important that when people come to us, they're hungry and we feed them, right? But for most of our time, for 34 of our 45 years, we lived into I was hungry and you fed me, pretty literally. Because when somebody came for food, we just gave them a box of pre-prepared, cans that we thought were going to be the best things to give to those families. We would work ahead of time to bag up a lot of canned goods and bread and all of these things, put them in bags for a family of one or a family of three, and then we would combine those bags to get to whatever family size we were helping. And at times, that's the way it was when I started at Restore Hope in 2011. When I started at Restore Hope in 2011, we would bag up those things, and occasionally we would find food left at the bus stop in front of our building. And honestly, we got a little mad about that. Because we did all that work. We prepared those bags. We gave you food. Why would you leave it at the bus stop? And especially the person who was in charge of our food program, he was especially upset because he was the one helping put those things together. And I asked him a simple question: did we ever ask them what they want? When you go grocery shopping, whether you do it in the store or shop online, you get to pick what you want, right? You even get to pick what kind of canned vegetables you want. Do you want Del Monte or do you want Always Save, right? You get to pick between those things. I get to pick between those things. But we weren't allowing the people who were coming asking for food to choose. We weren't asking that simple question of, what do you want? And think about the dignity of just asking that question. Instead of just getting a handout of, here's this stuff, you're hungry, here's food, I hope you like it, I hope you know how to make it, I hope you're not allergic to it, I hope it's culturally significant for you. Instead of just giving them a box of what we thought was the thing that they wanted, we started just asking them the simple question: what would you like? Now, we were the first food pantry in the city of Tulsa to ask that question. There had been others around the country and around the state that had asked that question of what do you want, but there were no other food pantries. When we started doing that in 2012, there were no other food pantries who were asking that question. Now there are a number of places where the client can actually go shopping. They take their cart around and they pull it off of the shelf. Now, we don't do that because I'm an efficiency guy. I like efficiency. I like things done well, and you know, I would say I could be a good Presbyterian because I like things decently and in order. But I'm a Methodist because I'm methodical too. But we kind of, before Reese's ever did shopping online, we kind of have that kind of model. So we just simply ask, well, pick 3 of our 5 vegetables. We'll have 5 vegetables all the time. We'll have peas, corn, green beans, carrots, and mixed vegetables. We'll have those all the time. Pick 3 of those. And if you just want corn, well, you're going to get a lot of corn, but here you go. And we have a spreadsheet that matches the number of cans that we need to give out to the size of family. So instead of putting a bag of 1 and 3 together to make 4, we type those into we just put that it's a family of 4, and our spreadsheet tells us, okay, give them 12 cans of food or whatever it might be. And so instead of now people leaving things at the bus stop, instead of us giving them food that they may or may not eat or know how to make, every can that we're giving out is something that's chosen by the family. I mean, we thought peanut butter was gold because ounce to ounce, it was the most expensive thing in our pantry. It was the thing we were spending the most money on. But there are plenty of people who are allergic to peanut butter, so we were literally giving them something that was harmful for them. Or in other cases, we were giving them food that they would never eat because they don't know how to make dried beans. It's a lost art anyway, but now when we give that food out, we know that it's being chosen and selected by those families. And we work with local grocery stores and other partners to make that food as fresh and as healthy as possible. So now, in addition to just giving them the right number of cans, we use the USDA. It's called a My Plate now. It's gone from pyramids to plates and all of these different things. But we try to match the number of fruits and vegetables that we give out to the amount that we're supposed to be giving out, that a family is supposed to be eating. We try to provide low sodium vegetables so that we're not adding to people's blood pressure. We try to provide low sugar fruits so that we're not adding to the diabetes problem. You know, we're trying to help people with food, and we think about that in really deep ways, all the way down to how our volunteers go through the food pantry to pull that order so that you're not putting cans on the top of bread and other things like that. So I think the way that we help with food now is really great. And I'll come back to another innovation that was just starting. The last time I spoke here, that innovation was just starting, and it's come to make a really big difference. So remind me to come back to that. But the thing that we've been doing, especially most recently, the thing that we're most known for is our rent assistance program. And I would call that one of the major programs of Restore Hope 2.0. So when we became Restore Hope and we moved into our current building was about the time that we started helping with financial assistance. And when we started helping with financial assistance in about 94, 95, it was $100, or $75, $125. And y'all know from paying your own utility bills, and you can imagine what rent has done over that time, that $100 is just not gonna match what we need to, what people really need to get the help that they want. And so starting in 94, with just about $100 per family, we built up a rent assistance program, and we built expertise in preventing homelessness. Because as Ken said, it's really important for us to help families who are currently homeless. And I've been part of that, as I said, working with Wayne and others at Away Home for Tulsa. I was the chair of Away Home for Tulsa for 2 years, which is our community's response to homelessness. It's really important to have good shelters. It's really important to have agencies that are housing families, putting them in permanent housing. It's really important to have services to go out and do outreach to those families. But if we can prevent homelessness from starting at the beginning, if we can keep a family in their home, if we can keep those kids in their school, if we can keep them from falling into that cycle, that downward spiral that leads to so many other associated problems, if we can keep them in their home, that's a big win. Now, these numbers may have changed over the last several years, but at one point, we determined it cost about $2,000 to shelter a family of 4 in one of our amazing shelters here in Tulsa. Now, it's money well spent because they're in shelter, they're not out on the streets, they're getting the care that they need, but it costs on average about $2,000 for a family of 4. We had a program called Rapid Rehousing for a time, and so we know that moving a family from homelessness into an apartment also has a cost, and that cost is usually about $1,500. So for a family of 4 to move from homelessness into an apartment, it's about $1,500. That's cheaper than keeping them in the shelter, and so we need to do more of that, but it's still about $1,500. Now, on average, our rent assistance can be as low as $500. Now, right now, we're paying more than that, and I'll get into that. But we can keep a family in their home for $500 or even $1,000. Now, y'all are really smart people, I can just tell. Which do you think is, we need to spend all of those things, but for me and my dollars, $1,000, we can help more people more often with that's more efficient, that's a more efficient way to help people, and we're keeping them from that cycle of poverty. So for me, that has always made sense. It has always made sense that we need to prevent homelessness before it starts. That we can do a lot of things in our community if we can just stop homelessness before it ever happens. And now the data has actually proven me right, which I'm really thankful for. It's nice when you think something is true and then the data backs you up. That's a really nice thing. But for a long time, we didn't think that proof would be possible. Because the only real way to prove if rent assistance works is to do a scientific study and split a group of people. So we'll pretend you are a group of people that are in need of rent assistance, that you are facing eviction. And we help this side. Sorry, Ken. And we don't help this side, right? Because then you can know the impact of it, right? Then you can see, does rent assistance work? If you pay somebody's rent, do they prevent homelessness more often than somebody who you don't pay? Because the theory for a long time is that people are just going to figure out a way, that if you don't help them, they'll figure out a way and they'll pay it on their own, that the payment of rent assistance isn't as effective as we think it is. In fact, I had a HUD consultant tell me that nationally, most agencies didn't think that it was worthwhile to prevent homelessness. Well, actually, a couple years ago, a group in Santa Barbara, California, did that study. They did that academic study on homeless prevention, on paying rent, and it turns out not only is it more efficient, is it cheaper to pay somebody's rent, to use those dollars to prevent homelessness, it has long-term downstream impacts, and it's extremely effective to prevent homelessness. So now I have data to back that up. So I can trot out this Santa Barbara County study every time I want. So when people say, is homeless prevention effective? Yes, of course it is. It makes sense that it is, but now the academic data backs it up, and so I can bring that out if I need to. And so Restore Hope has been helping with rent assistance for a long time. The year before COVID was our busiest year up to that point, and we helped with $305,000 in rent assistance. That was a lot. $305,000 was actually $100,000 more than our grants at that time. Now, I'm the executive director. I'm responsible for the budget, and I'm looking at that budget, and we spent $100,000 more than our budget. And I went to our board and I said, look, I don't think we can keep that up. We had some reserves in place that would allow us to spend into that we could spend $100,000 more, but I just don't know about that. And my board has heard me preach before, and I'll give you some options for what we talk about next week. Next week we're going to get theological. So next week we're going to dive deep into theology, and one of those options is talking about scarcity and abundance. And I talk about scarcity and abundance a lot, and the myth of scarcity and the truth of abundance. And so one of my board members said, aren't you the abundance guy? Like, if we're supposed to be doing this rent assistance work, why are you talking, and if it works, if it's efficient, if it's the best thing for us to do, why are you talking about cutting it back? If we need to do this, we need to budget and we need to raise the money to get there. And it was the first time ever that Restore Hope's budget went over $1 million. When I started at Restore Hope, the budget was $500,000 all in for everything. And that was 7 years later, we were talking about going over $1 million. Yes, of course.
How long do you provide this rent assistance?
Usually it's just one time. Right now, that's a little bit different because of the COVID program, which I can talk about a little bit. And by the way, feel free to raise your hands. I'm a serial interrupter myself, and so raising hands is lovely. Thank you for doing that. If you just want to shout at me, I'm used to that too. But usually it's just one time, and actually we're getting back to that just one time. But it's usually just at that point, when the time period that I'm talking about, it was usually a little bit, maybe at most a little bit more than a month. So we're not talking about multiple months of assistance, we're talking about 1 month. And it's emergency rent assistance, not public housing, which I'll talk about as well, hopefully. I am also cognizant of time, and I'm a long-winded preacher, so there's that. So the board said, let's raise this money, let's do what we need to do. And I said, okay, well, I'm comfortable going to $275,000. So we'll raise the budget from $200,000 to $275,000, because that way, if we spend $300,000, we're just eating into our reserves by $25,000, not $100,000. They said, well, we'll raise it, we'll get there. That busy year was 2018, 2019, that we spent $305,000. The next fiscal year was 2019-20. Our fiscal year is July to June, and so 2019-20, our budget was $275,000, and in about March of 2020, we were right on track to spend that $275,000. Y'all remember what happened in March of 2020? Yeah, an NBA player spat on some microphones and the world shut down. Obviously, things changed with COVID, right? And at some point early on, in a good way with the court system, because the eviction court system totally shut down because of COVID. And so nobody could be evicted for a while. And so actually, our rent team wasn't busy helping with rent assistance. What they were busy doing at that point was researching the rules. So the CARES Act had a moratorium on evictions that you couldn't evict if you had a federally backed mortgage, you couldn't evict somebody that was in that home. Now, how many of you know, some of you may be blessed to not have a mortgage at this point, but how many of you know if you have a federally backed mortgage? I didn't know that my own mortgage was federally backed because, mortgage, they sell the mortgages to a number of different companies, and I didn't know that my own home was covered by that, and most landlords didn't know if the homes that they were renting were covered by a federally backed mortgage. And so our team was helping landlords understand if they could or not evict, and tenants understand if they could or not be evicted. And so we did research to find out what that was and helped our community in that process. But ultimately, the Tulsa Community Foundation and the United Way came to us and they said, we're starting to hear about evictions and we're starting to hear of a need. Would you help meet that need? You've been helping with rent assistance for all this time. Would you help? So we said sure, and we received a $35,000 grant from TCF and the United Way to start that. May 1st is when we started that program of 2020, and we spent that $35,000 in 2 weeks. So I went back to them and I said, could we do $75,000 next time? Could we get $75,000? They said, sure. $75,000 was gone in another 2 weeks. And it just started ramping up from there. In the end, we spent over $800,000 of that Tulsa Community Foundation United Way funds preventing homelessness. Remembering that our whole budget when I started was $500,000, and that $300,000 was our big year for grant. Isn't it amazing that when we actually believe in abundance, when we actually do the things that God has called us to do, the resources just show up? My board member started laughing at me when we crossed that 275 mark because he said, look, we've got the resources, here it goes. As we were spending that $800,000, the Schusterman family came to us and they said, The courts are about to reopen and a lot of people are about to be evicted. Could we pay everybody's rent that is about to be evicted? Yeah. Oh, that's a lot. They said, how much would that cost? And we said, it would be about $1.5 million to pay everybody's rent. Now, mind you, we had never received a Schusterman family grant before. The only thing we had received from them was a matching gift from somebody who worked at Samson. And it was $25, I think. Our first grant from the Schusterman Foundation was $1 million. As we're spending that $800,000, the Schusterman family said, what if we gave you $1 million? And I went back to our board and I said, look, this is going to be hard work. They said, well, if not us, who? And if we say no, what does that say to us? And then worse than that, they quoted the Bible on me. And a passage that's particularly close to my heart, they quoted Esther. And Esther's uncle Mordecai says, perhaps you are here for such a time as this. So we said yes. And in the end, we distributed $1 million of those funds to keep families from being homeless. And it didn't stop there, because that was June. In July of that year, the governor, through some members of his cabinet, came to us and said, we got this CARES Act money. We would like to prevent homelessness with it. We'd like to prevent evictions with it. Would you be willing to be a part of that? Now, that's different, right? So the United Way money and Schusterman have one big thing in common. They're private dollars. That CARES Act was federal dollars. And if you're familiar with federal dollars, you know that if you spend over $750,000, you get what's called a single audit. It's a special review. Now, our books are open. Look at us. We do the best we can. We make the right decisions as much as we can. I'm not worried about our audits, but it's a hassle, right? It's a lot of stuff to go through. And it's anxiety producing for me and all of those things. I said I really would rather not do that. But that echo of perhaps we're here for such a time as this kept going through my head. So we said yes, and ultimately spent $2.2 million of those funds preventing homelessness. So now y'all are smart. You're good at math, and so you know that 1 year before we were at $300,000, and we're now at $4 million in the first year of COVID, distributing help for rent assistance. We helped over 1,800 families. The year before that, we were at 400 families. So we more than quadrupled in a year. We weren't done. Because then, as Ken noted, the state of Oklahoma, again, Tulsa County, and the city of Tulsa all came to us and said, hey, you've done some pretty good work with rent assistance. We've got a new pool of funds. Would you use that to help families in need? So we launched what was called the Emergency Rent Assistance Program, or ERAP, in March of 2021. So just 1 year after that shutdown. From March of 2021 to November of 2022, we distributed another $54 million in rent assistance. Now, that was an incredible opportunity. We helped almost 13,000 families prevent homelessness through that time. Those of you who have any business experience or even running a small group, imagine that growth from 300,000 to $54 million. And the administrative fund of all of that. Go ahead.
How big an area would you help keep? Was it just Tulsa folk, or?
Most of that help was in the city and county of Tulsa. So about 20 million of the dollars came from the city and county of Tulsa. But we also helped Northeast Oklahoma. And there was another group that popped up called Community Cares Partners after the CARES Act. They started in Oklahoma City. Up until that point, we were really the only agency in the state of Oklahoma helping with rent assistance. They popped up. They're now not helping with rent assistance anymore, so I think we're kind of back to being really the only one predominantly helping with rent assistance, which I don't really like, but it is the case. And we're back to just in Tulsa County now. So we helped a lot of people. We went to Muskogee and Bartlesville and a number of places around Tulsa County. And so we helped significantly outside of that, but not as significantly as within Tulsa County. So most of those funds, probably I would say around $50 million of those 54 probably went right here in Tulsa County. I don't know the exact number. I probably should, but I don't know. Of course.
If I came to you and said I need rent assistance, what are you going to look at as far as I'm concerned before you give me that kind of money?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of work over time, 25 years plus of helping families with rent assistance. So we know a little bit of the tools of the trade and tricks of the trade in a sense, right? So we're going to make sure that we have some proof of who you are. So we're going to make sure we have ID and social and that sort of thing. We're going to make sure that you have a late notice because we want to show that you could potentially be homeless. If a late notice shows that. And then we're going to dive into the actual residency and ownership of the house, make sure that that is accurate. You can imagine, and there are federal guidelines too, which by the way, when we launched in March 15th of 2021, the Treasury Department had never helped with rent assistance before. It was the first time they had ever helped with rent assistance, and it was an act that was passed under the Trump administration and enacted by the Biden administration. So there had all kinds of stuff with that, right? They were changing the regulations every month for the first several months. So we're trying to ramp up a program at an exponential level. We're building a plane or a rocket ship probably and fixing it on the way up. And adding flaps and adding, all of the things. And so there were certainly in that ramp up, there were times where we didn't hit that mark as many times as we would like. But I will say that just this year, the state auditor came out and looked at rent assistance in writ large, and we came out clear. We came out having done what we were supposed to do, which doesn't surprise me given our team. We have an amazing team. We messed up. There are times that we made mistakes, but all in all, I'm a Methodist. We're moving on toward perfection. We're trying to do the things that we're supposed to be doing. So we do a deep dive into who's supposed to and who's not supposed to get the help. Significantly, yeah, it's a great question. So I would say as far as full-time staff, we've moved from about 10 to 13, so not really a deep impact on our full-time staff, but we added a lot of contractors over that time. And so that was another key is bringing the right people to do the things that we needed to do. I will say we did hire a subcontractor who was a total and complete failure. We had worked with them on that first CARES Act program in 2020 with the state, but we had worked with them in a kind of a side way. They were just an application processor. When we opened the new program, we knew we needed help. And they were supposed to provide a good application for people to apply. They were supposed to provide a call center for people to call in for questions. They were supposed to review the cases, and we were just going to do quality control. And they were supposed to send us a payment schedule with the right information to pay the right people at the right time. They failed at absolutely all of it. Absolutely all of it. When I say total and complete failure, I mean total and complete failure. And so the only way that we could distribute all of that money well and pass all of those audits is we had to build in systems ourselves to overcome their mistakes. And so it actually sent me into therapy. I'm not, I do want to say that there's, and I didn't think I needed counseling ever. I thought I'm a pretty capable guy. I could do what I want. After my second panic attack, I knew that I needed counseling. And I just want to say to anybody who struggles with any of that, with anxiety or any of that, it's okay. Counseling helped. Now, it was counseling and prayer for me, and I needed that community of faith to help me get through. But I'm so thankful for my counselor who, when I told her that story, she said, wait, Jeff, I know that you're a perfectionist. I know that you're a high achiever. And I know that you think you failed, but You just told me you distributed $54 million and helped 13,000 families, all while you had a subcontractor that was a total and complete failure, and you think you messed up? Honestly, we could have stopped the counseling sessions at that moment because I think I was pretty good after that. But thankfully, she helped me through that. So, but yeah, so we did increase our staff. We did have contractors, but it was, I mean, there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to make that happen. It was a lot of heroism from people that aren't getting to stand up and tell you about it today. Our staff were really pretty great. I saw a question here and a question here.
Where do you find your people? Do they come to you, or do you go out and find them?
We tend to try to hire organically. And so we haven't really had a lot of good luck using like job search or public posts. Oh, clients, they come to us. Yeah, word of mouth is probably the biggest way. I mean, when people hear, I mean, if you find out about a good deal somewhere, you're going to tell your friends. And in the same way, if you find out about assistance, you're going to tell your friends. So we did a little bit of marketing at the beginning, but most of our marketing dollars, most of the funds we spent were really helped with helping the community understand why it was taking us longer than they thought that it should have taken us. At one point, everybody from the clients to the President of the United States were telling us to go faster. And he was, I mean, all of them just they knew that the assistance needed to get out there, right? It needed to be engaged. But I knew that we had the audits coming, and so we were trying to overcome all of those. So, but word of mouth was the biggest. It still is the biggest.
Well, that's my basic question, but so they have to call you or come to your building to ask for help.
So during COVID, there was an online application process, and so if they didn't have computers, we went and did some on-site. We went to different churches and did some on-site application. But most people have computers. In fact, it's more powerful than the biggest supercomputers that existed when I was growing up. And so most people applied on their phone. Most people have access to the internet on their phone, and our application was web capable and mobile capable. So we did that. I will say now, so I will just transition into what we do now, because I know you have a reception to go to celebrate. So we stopped our applications, any new applications, January 30th of 2022, because at that point we had 10,000 applications still in our system, and we wanted to make sure we had enough money to get to the end of it. So the good news is we did have enough money to get to the end of it. And so in April of this year, we relaunched our rent assistance program with some new technology and some twists. So that's where I mentioned I was going to come back to the program that started 5 years ago for food. So 5 years ago, we launched a program called Assist OK. And Assist OK is a network and a software program. So it's a network of social service agencies. It's now us, Broken Arrow Neighbors, Owasso Community Resources, Neighbors Along the Line, and Catholic Charities. And so we started with those organizations to share data. And so if somebody comes into one of our organizations for food, we have that data. So they don't have to go, we don't have to re-enter the data. They don't have to tell their story. They don't have to drag their documents out every time. We have all of that data. And so starting in 2018, February of 2018, that program launched. Now we have over 100,000 clients in that system and over 40,000 households. And so when somebody comes to us, we already have that data. And it's been good for the clients because they don't have to carry their stuff around. It's good for us because we don't have to do all that data entry. But it's really good for us as a community because we can use that data for research. Where do we need to have food pantries? Where do we need to go to do this work? What's the impact of poverty compared to local schools and other things? And so we can now use that data. And it's on that platform that we're now using for rent assistance. So we relaunched in April of this year with that new system in mind. And so if you have a late notice, you can call in to a group called Tulsa Responds that is there to help families apply for our program. If you have an eviction notice, if you have already received that court notice, then we recommend that they go in person to our staff that is right across the street from the courthouse, and they help them apply in person there. We don't want them to be evicted. We don't require an eviction notice or a court eviction, but if they have, we want to work quickly to make sure that we can prevent that lockout. So we have a hybrid system now of both applying on the phone. We don't have the online application anymore, but over the phone with our team or in person with our team. And since April of this year, we've distributed another $2 million. So I issued payments just this week for $300,000 in rent assistance to help hundreds of families, actually over 100 families in need. So right now, our average assistance is about $2,500 to $3,000. That's going to change though, because those are still some of those federal dollars, and those federal dollars are going away. And there's just not the political will to bring those back. I don't think those big dollars are coming soon. So what we need to figure out as a community is, okay, how are we going to work together to solve this problem? And I think that's Restore Hope 3.0, because Restore Hope 3.0 looks more collaborative. And so it's working with groups like the Financial Empowerment Center to help families with their budget, to help them get out of debt, to build better credit, to build savings. It's working with groups like Legal Aid and others to prevent eviction in other ways. It's helping people with food and all of those other things that we do, but it's doing so in a collaborative effort because we can't do it on our own. We just can't. One last question, then I want to give you a choice for next week. Associated job placement program, we don't at Restore Hope, but Goodwill has a great one. And so that's actually part of what I was just saying with Restore Hope 3.0 is a lot of times there's a pressure on agencies to do a lot of different things, because I know that job placement is important and financial counseling is important and other aspects of care are important, but I also know nobody else does rent assistance. So we're going to focus on rent assistance and partner with those other groups that do those other things well. And so we actually have opened up space in our building at both locations. We have 2 full-time locations now, one at Asbury Church at 71st and Mingo, and our main campus just west of downtown. And so we have physical spaces in those locations that Financial Empowerment, Goodwill, Legal Aid, Hunger Free Oklahoma to help people apply for food stamps and other things, they can all be in our building, and that way if our clients need their help, we just have them go right there. And so that's the next step for us, is building that collaborative approach to respond to need. Okay, we're in a democracy, so you get to decide what we talk about next week. 3 topics. One is we could talk about the myth of scarcity and the truth of abundance. Mention that a little bit. Another is we could talk about the power of community over individuals. And the third is something that has been close to my heart as a United Methodist pastor. And if you know about the United Methodist Church right now, you know we're having some issues. I've believed for a long time that the personal gospel, having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and the social gospel, how we live that out in community, helping families in need, there has been a false dichotomy splitting those 2 things. And it's split our church, literally split the United Methodist Church. But it's a false dichotomy. And so topic 1 is myth of scarcity, truth of abundance. Topic 2 is the power of community over individual. And topic 3 is personal versus social, which is not a versus. So raise your hand for topic 1. Raise your hand for topic 2. Raise your hand for topic 3. Ken and I predicted that. That's okay. Like I said, it's close to my heart. It's been the challenge of my faith life. So that's what we'll talk about next week. And if you have any questions about Restore Hope, please don't hesitate to ask. You can come up to me. Also, if you are on any of the social medias, follow us at RHM Tulsa. We tell good stories on there, and it's helpful if you like us and follow us. Okay? Thank you.